can get this kicked off. This is an onX Masterclass called Finding Light Tours with Beacon Guidebooks. Throughout the presentation here, you'll see the running theme and thread of the partnership between Beacon Guidebooks and onX Maps, which is now 5 years old, and it's just been an awesome partnership, just playing on each other's strengths for the past few years, and say getting better and better. If you have questions, you can pop them in the chat throughout this session. You can chat in the chat. Feel free. It's not distracting Richard and I too much. And we have the wonderful Matt Madick and Liz Fireman behind the scenes answering your questions. So that way I'm not trying to answer your questions and speak at the same time. That would be a big fat mess. And at the end of this whole presentation, there will be a giveaway for Light Tours guidebooks. So we have 3 Light Tours of Colorado guidebooks to give away and 3 Light Tours of Tahoe guidebooks to give away. Plus, everybody that wins a guidebook will also win an onX hat. So stick around for that. If you can't stick around all the way till the end, you don't have to be present to win. You just had to show up and fill out the form. We'll get to that. Introductions. Introduce myself. My name's Andy Sovic. I founded Beacon Guidebooks 11 years ago now. And then about a year ago, I jumped on with onX Backcountry as the senior content manager, which means I deal with a lot of the lines and doodlies on top of the map that you see in the onX app. So you'll see mountain bike trails and routes and hiking routes and all the backcountry ski content. I'm constantly working on that, trying to make sure it's reliable, responsible, and accurate. Started Beacon Guidebooks 11 years ago when I made a simple little staple-bound atlas for skiing in the Crested Butte backcountry, Crested Butte, Colorado, where I live. And I'd been there, I've been in the valley now here for 20 years. And I just always wanted a photographic atlas, much like the ones that I saw in the Tetons when I was a ski bum up there in the early 2000s. And there's a really cool staple-bound aerial photo atlas of the Tetons, and that was my inspiration. And after that first guidebook, guides around the country started calling me and asking if they could pen a similar guidebook for their area. And that's how the publishing company was born. 5 years ago, we integrated the content into onX. I had always wanted it to be digital, but I'm not a digital guy. I'm a paper guy and a carpenter by trade. And so the digital world was intimidating to me. So I was really excited to see onX come along, and they kind of said all the right things, asked all the right questions, and I really felt like they had their hearts in the right spot for making this content right. So that's the brief history on me. About was it 3 years ago? I met Richard Bothwell and implored him to write a Light Tours of Tahoe guidebook. It was going to be the second Light Tours book that we had. It's just a concept that I really love. You'll hear my passion throughout this whole presentation of how much I love the concept of Light Tours. And Richard, even though he's known to ski some pretty gnarly stuff, was willing to talk about the hippie pow and the low angle stuff too. So I'll let you introduce yourself, Richard.
Great, thanks. Thank you, Andy. Yeah, I am Richard Bothwell, and I'm a split boarder by and large, and I try to be a skier from time to time. And I'm kind of a one-trick pony. I like backcountry skiing, and in the winter I do a lot of it, and in the summer I do other things when I'm really just thinking about going backcountry skiing. So it is my trick as a one-trick pony. I think it's a pretty good one. I'm glad I chose that one. I am a ski guide and a splitboard guide. I run a guide service called the Outdoor Adventure Club that's based in San Francisco and operates around California. And as Andy said, I put together the Light Tours of Tahoe Beacon guidebook that I'm pretty stoked on, and that we're going to be spending some time talking about tonight for sure. And I'm also one of the co-founders of an organization called Slab Lab, which is the short version is it is that we know of the only backcountry specific social network where you can find partners specifically who are looking for new partners to go backcountry skiing in. So, or to go backcountry skiing with. So I think that's my short story. I'm ready to go, Andy.
It's a good story, man. It's
Awesome.
been an absolute pleasure to work with Richard. Even though he's a split boarder, it's been pretty productive so far. Um, I'm glad to have. Actually, it's kind of wild the amount of Beacon authors. Of all the Beacon authors, I think half of them are split boarders. Um, I just made that stat up, but just taking a quick glance, I think that's true. More than you'd think. I'll just put it that way. And Matt here behind the scenes is also a split boarder, so there's more than we think.
Yeah.
Um,
Hey, Andy, before we get going, can I give one quick shout out?
yeah,
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to Alex Zobel, who is super cool. She lives in the Bay Area. She makes beer, which is awesome. She has a brewery called Armistice. But she is the reason that Light Tours of Tahoe actually exists. She found the Light Tours of Colorado guidebook and was asking in the San Francisco Backcountry Skier Facebook group if something like that existed in California. And she and I started talking about it and started thinking about trying to put the project together. And that's where, to everybody else, that's where Andy dove in. But without Alex, we would not have this guidebook. So I want to give her heaps of praise and credit.
totally. Her enthusiasm was awesome at the inception of this book. It's a big project, as you learned. It's like you think it's going to be easy because these things. Here's Richard's book in paper. It's just this little, spiral bound book. Like how long could that take? And it's a labor of love. And not only does the book itself as a project take a long time, there's just a lot of work that goes into it, a lot of fact checking and double checking and questioning and all that stuff. But it also took you, many, many, many years to gain that knowledge. So not a light undertaking to make a light tourist book. Um, so throughout this present, like we're really going to dive deep into talking about light tours. Like, what is this term? What exactly does it mean? What is the concept in general? It's at the end of the day, it's just a word, but what are we really getting at? How do we find them? And if you don't have, if you're not in the Tahoe or Colorado area, how do you find your own light tours? How did Richard and I go about it before we made the books? We're going to really dive deep into that. A couple housekeeping things real quick. Um, we've already talked about Beacon Guidebooks. I won't go deeper into that, but we do want to let you know that if you are an elite member of Backcountry, you can save 35% at the Beacon Guidebooks website. It's like a pro deal. Once you become an elite member, it's very easy to find how to go about that. So if uh, if you want to become an elite member, or if you already are, then you should take advantage of that. It's a pretty sweet little partnership deal we have. You can scan this code right here. Today's masterclass attendees save 70% on a new Backcountry Premium or Elite membership. Uh, Pretty darn good deal. Scan the code or visit that link. Matt's going to drop that in the chat too. So, oh, he already dropped it in the chat. That looks great. Like I said, we're going to do a giveaway at the end. Matt's going to spin the wheel for us, which is always fun, spinning wheels. And we'll give away the books and hats. We'll ship them to you later. So we'll follow up with you afterwards. Like I said, you don't have to stick around till the end. We know this is that you have your own lives and you maybe can't stick around till the end. That being said, we're really aiming for an hour here, guys. We'll see how we do. If we're all having fun, then we'll stick around for as long as you all want. Within reason, right, Richard? Within reason.
Yeah, within reason.
So what are we going to talk about? Like I said, we're going to talk about what is a light tour? Where are they? How do we go about making them? How can you go about making your own? And when is the best time to do them? Like when and why, I think is what I really want to get into. And Richard and I have a good solid history now of bantering back and forth. And that's my intention here is to get into some bantering here. So I'm not exactly sure where this is going to go, but if we haven't served you the when, where, why, and how of light tours at the end, then we got really down a rabbit hole and must have had some fun.
Yeah.
Um, I
And hey,
do,
Andy,
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't want to like take us down the rabbit hole of diving into every Q&A question that comes up on
Yeah.
the spot, but I think David Porter just asked a great question saying, he's in Utah. Will he benefit from this master class? And I think the answer is yes, right? I mean, this is going to be a lot of what is it? How do you find them? How can I do this when I don't have a beacon guidebook to show me the way? Is that, are we tracking on that?
Yeah, we're totally tracking. I mean, the amount of people that are here from places that do not have a nice little light tours guidebook is quite a few. And so we do want to spend a lot of time talking about the tools we use to build light tours. And this should be just a fair like question for everybody. I'll try to
Yeah.
say more specifically what we're going to talk about, and then you can decide if it's worth your time or not. By the way, it's recorded. These master classes can always be found on the onX YouTube channel, right, Matt? Um, Yeah, we'll be talking about how to utilize not only slope angle shading, which most of us are very familiar with now, but starting zone layers, run out layers in onX, the eights layer, which is something that I've been pouring lots and lots of time and passion into lately, to be building your own. These, like the light tours, and not only do we have light tours in these books, the amount of light tours or almost light tours that Richard and I left out of our books are massive. So hopefully we enable you to go kind of like find your own, no matter where you are. So certainly we'll be focusing on examples from Colorado and Tahoe, since that's like the content that we have in the map. But I think one of the exercises I want to go through, let me know if this sits well with you, Richard, is I kind of want to try to plan my own light tour in a place that I've never been, or I'm not familiar with, to show folks how it is we go about using all these layers that we have in onX to our advantage when we're going into unfamiliar territory.
Love it.
Love it. We will have a Q&A at the end, so if there are questions that really do need to be like addressed publicly, um, then Matt and Liz will feed those to us afterwards. Yeah, and we don't want to go over every comment, Richard, because a lot of people, it sounds like you have some friends that are gonna just like start giving you a really hard time about everything. So we might want to
No, I just thought that was a good one to for the entire group to hear. So
absolutely.
yeah.
Okay, so a couple new things we're excited about at onX that directly feed into this topic. The one is we just made a simple change, but I think it's a powerful change, which is previously our slope angle shading started at 25 degrees and would go up from there. And as we know with light tours, you can ski often on slopes that are less than 25 degrees. Uh, but up until now, the terrain that was anywhere between 0 and 25 degrees was all the same color. But what I want to know as a skier is where can I go skiing that I can get some wiggles if the conditions are right, but I'm well clear of avalanche terrain. And a lower angle slope shading will really help with that. And when we go into the demo, I'll kind of show some examples of that. But the whole point is to kind of shift the model of thinking from like, here's a bunch of dangerous places for you to avoid. What if we could start shading some things that kind of help show you with illustration where to go, or where you can at least consider going?
And
So that's
hey, Andy, I'll tell you, I think that change that onX has made is one of the things that I'm most excited by because it it kind of moves it away from, you know, do we have to avoid, like, is it binary? Is it, over 30 or under 30? And kind of gives us a fun zone
totally.
layer.
Yeah. Yeah. Same. But
So I'm
what
stoked
we
on that.
wanted to do is make sure that we're not also highlighting, we wanted to do it 12 to 25 because really below 12, that's really hard to get some
Yeah.
time on. Um,
Yeah.
but that
You're
also
not on
helps.
the golf course.
Yeah. The other cool thing about that is there are like Forest Service roads I really want to go ski on sometimes that are below 12 degrees. And I want to know if I'm going to take somebody there that, oh, say has like two replacement knees that we're not going to get above 12 degrees. And once again, now because I have that lower end covered, I know anything not colored green or any other color is going to be very flat. And so to me, that's kind of useful too. It's just more definition, right?
Yep.
Um, Okay, the other thing, obviously, that we're talking about is what onX is calling low angle descents. We've labeled all the routes in our light tours books as low angle. So where you see low angle approaches, you see low angle approaches. Where it's descents, you see descents. And we have them marked and labeled so that when you click the Discover tab in onX, you'll see these low angle ski tour descents kind of boosted for everyone to find a little bit easier so you don't have to go sifting through all the stuff and try to figure out which ones are the ones we've tagged as lower angle. So another cool little feature, and we'll be adding a bunch of those throughout this next year. Every month we'll probably see new ones. So that's pretty exciting. The last one that I could just talk about forever is our eights expansion. So last year we finished the ski season with 14 new regions covered by eights, and we've doubled that now, covering a bunch of Utah, Colorado, Wyoming, Washington, even Alaska, and our subject matter, Tahoe. Eights, we'll talk a lot about the the main what it stands for is Avalanche Terrain Exposure Scale. It's a way of measuring a mountain's ability to create an avalanche. And the way that I just like to, we can talk about it forever. It gets very academic, but the simple explanation is what we're trying to do with this layer is illustrate what the mountains are capable of doing when it comes to avalanches. Are they capable of a lot, or are they capable of a little? And that's what these four colors you see should illustrate. Green being simple, blue challenging, black complex, and red extreme. And in a spot like the Grand Teton, it's kind of obvious, but in other places, it's very subtle and something that professionals like Richard spend a lot of time uh, trying to figure out how to stay in the terrain that they want to stay in. So I'm going to switch to our web map demo so that we can. Does that look right to you, Richard?
It looks right to me.
All right, sweet. So that we can really get into the details here. Richard, like I said, you've been known to ski some steep, gnarly stuff, and most of us
Yeah.
agree that it's like one of the most fun things in the world to ski a steep line and get home alive. Why do you still like to have a bunch of light tours in your back pocket?
Oh, man. You know, light tours for me are there's a number of reasons. You know, one of those reasons is it's the gateway for exploring. Like when I'm going zone, I want to go out and I'm like, I want to go ski something fun, and I want to make turns. I don't want to just cruise across the golf course. I do want to make turns, and all the routes in the book that I wrote are all geared towards we're going to make turns. But I might want to, like if I live in on the north side of Lake Tahoe, and if I was going to the south side, which is not my home zone, to find a light tour down there that can introduce me to that zone has a lot of benefit for me. Um, when I am going out with a partner, not somebody necessarily inexperienced, but just someone I haven't been skiing with. I want to go out on a light tour. At Slab Lab, we have this idea that we push called thinking of your partners as being in a quiver, kind of how we think about skis being in a quiver. We think that people will have better ski days if they think about their partners as being part of a quiver. And if I have a big day partner, or if I have a calorie burning partner, or if I have an after work partner, each of those partners has a different role in my quiver. And when I go uh, to go start picking out from my trip options catalog where I might want to go skiing, I want to pick the right partner for that terrain. So having a new partner in my quiver, I want to typically go to a light tour to see what they're all about. And maybe the light tour is like the first half of the day, and we figure out like, yeah, this partnership has some legs. Let's go do something bigger. And sometimes we can do that. Um, I think I like light tours on days when the danger is high. As we're increasing the danger, I scale back the terrain. And I've told you this, I think, in real time before. Like I used to tell people when I was teaching classes that I used to tell people that I'll go skiing on high avalanche danger days. I just want to be really meticulous about the terrain that I'm skiing in and avoid avalanche terrain. And now I put one more asterisk onto that and say that on high avalanche danger days, I'll ski in terrain that is not avalanche terrain, but it's also got to be terrain that I'm familiar with. So I want to start looking at these bits of terrain in the that are light tours, set them aside for like, hey, this is going to be that day when we get nuked on. I'm going to come back, but I'm already somewhat familiar with the tour. So I don't know. There's a handful of scenarios where I really count on light tours.
You mentioned the quiver concept to me recently, and it really like struck home with me as a way to illustrate this. And I think about to think about partners in a quiver, it's almost like an uncomfortable thing to to be that partner, right? Like now I'm objectified in Richard's quiver,
Mm,
right? Like I fit a type, but I really love it, right? Like I think it's being very honest, and I think there's also like I think you and I talked about this. I was like, maybe like the partnerships is actually the quiver, right? Like, how do I interact with you versus how do I interact when I'm skiing with my wife or with my
yeah,
son, or with, my longtime ski buddy.
that's
Um,
right.
like that's the quiver is actually it's
It,
very much the relationship, right?
it's how we act together. It's not just what that person is like, for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that. And then when I think about the quiver of terrain too, it made me realize that I think I already had that in my head as the way that I approach so much stuff. And recently that came up uh, when we had this big massive storm hit just after Thanksgiving in Colorado, and the Crested Butte kind of got the bullseye of the storm. We got like 3.5 inches of water and 4 feet, which is
Wow.
pretty massive for Colorado. And right before the storm, there were a whole bunch of south-facing slopes that didn't have any snow on them at all. And that to me, like there's a whole bunch of slopes and ski zones in my quiver that are in the back of my mind, basically, that I think like if we ever get 3 feet on top of this bare slope, south facing, it'll be good for one day before the sun comes out and crusts it all up. It will
Yep.
be safer than everything else because it doesn't have the weak layer problem that everything else is going to be
Yeah, right.
subject to. So those are like that's just like one example of how I think about pieces of terrain as quivers. So I started to look at those right away as soon as we saw that storm coming. Made sure I went and looked at them to see if there was any snow on them, and then
Yeah.
thought about how to make a tour. And sure enough, my wife and I did a steeper slope right after the storm, and there was no weak layer problem, and it was the right one to pull out of the quiver.
And
Uh,
Andy, the one thing that really resonates for me when you're recounting that is that you have that route now like in your recipe box. You already have it planned. You're not creating that recipe the morning of the trip. You're like, hey, when the conditions are right, this is a trip that we can do in this very narrow set of conditions. And I think that is so key for folks to understand that, we want to develop an idea about these routes and put them into our own catalog and understand what the conditions are like when it would be ideal to go ski those routes.
yeah,
And then when those conditions show up, we're like, oh yeah, we're just going to do this. I think too many people kind of start the day of or the night before, like I'm going to start drawing a squiggly line on the map, and I think we're missing a great opportunity if we're not doing that long and well in advance.
yeah, agreed. So we've talked a little bit about you and I the other day we were talking about like the sequence of deciding of like basically like getting out on the tour. Do we I often say like we want to start with the forecast, right? Just like be checking the weather, be checking the forecast. Um so that I don't So I don't set myself up for this bias that I think we're all guilty of at sometimes where I might say like, man, I've been looking at Incline Lake Peak for years
Right.
uh, because it's my friends skied it, showed me some photos of it. Like I want to go ski it. I'm gonna be there next week. Let me see if the conditions are good enough. And I'd start looking at the forecast. Well, right there, I've set myself up for this bias where I'm really hoping the conditions are good enough. So I
Right.
might trick myself into believing they are. So I often say like check conditions first and then try to find the terrain to match it. But you kind
Right.
of threw a wrench in there. You said we should actually, oftentimes we are working with our partners first. We pick or decide our partners before we even decide if we're going to go and when we're going to go and where. Is that
Yeah,
accurate?
absolutely. I mean, like this whole idea of objective driven, trip planning, like I must ski Incline Lake Peak, I must ski Incline Lake Peak. And I think that to your point, if we go and ski that when we're looking for the opportunities to ski that peak, we'll go when the conditions aren't ideal. And we'll be like shoehorning in our desire into whatever conditions we have. But even more so, I think, like for me, I start at the very top with who's on my team, and is the person I'm skiing with, like you use the example of, if somebody has, I think you said knee replacements or hip replacements or whatever the case may be. I'm like, all right, great. Well, what's my team look like? And how do we act? And how do we get along? And how do we communicate? And how does it work when we go on big days? And how does it work when we go on small days? And how does it work when we're out in a storm together? And how does it work when it's, sunny skies? But I definitely want to start with who is on my team, then talk about the conditions, then figure out, where, given the conditions and the team, where is it we might want to go skiing?
Totally. And yeah, and it can be both, right? Like sometimes I'll say I'll look at the forecast and I want to go skiing in a couple days, and I say like, oh, it looks like it's going to be considerable. That's really going to dictate who I'm going to call, who I'm even going to start
Totally,
to. Um, and same with
totally.
I love seeing low hazard because it really like what that does, it really expands the library or that quiver of uh of people you can call because usually what happens is you call your friend and they say, no, I'm working. You have to call someone else. Um,
Yep,
let's go through a couple of these, illustrate exactly what the light tour is and why it's a light tour.
let's
Um,
do it.
get before we get too heavy or deep. I've got two here, just to reorient everybody real quick because I've been panning and zooming for fun. Um, Hot tip, if you're ever like panning and zooming around in onX and you're like all of a sudden I have no idea where I am, I like to just click the 2D button at the bottom right. That reorients me north and in 2 dimensions. I zoom out and I say, okay, that's where I was. Okay, so off to Richard's book in the Tahoe zone. Uh, we not only have light tours in this region, we have some snowshoe routes. We have some other backcountry ski routes that are on the steeper side. You'll see some of the cool things that really help with making the trip plan, such as snowtail sites. When I select this, you'll see nothing's fallen in the last 24 hours. Is that true? Guess so. Um, 21-inch snow depth. You get all sorts of other cool features that snowtail gives us. Snow water equivalent, temperature, snow depth, cool stuff like that. Where was I? I was just at Incline Lake Peak, right?
That's right.
Everything over here, that's one heck of a network of cross-country ski trails there too,
Certainly is.
about as tight as it gets. Okay, the three layers that I said we were all excited about at onX is one, this slope angle layer that I said now we're highlighting this 12 to 30 degree or 12 to 25 degree stuff in the oops, clicked the wrong thing. In the layer details of slope angle, you'll see the illustration if you're ever confused of what orange means compared to red or something like that. You can just click in those layer details. We usually put in a little bit about how we come about them, how accurate they are, things like that. Yeah, like I said before, whereas you'd see just a lot more non-colored terrain, now we are seeing a lot of green terrain. And in this area, we have quite a bit of green world. So this is once again, if you don't have routes, here's another hot tip. If those routes are bugging you, you click on the Discover tab, click on All, and toggle off Show Routes. Now you just have a blank slate to deal with. So once again, if you don't have routes in your area, what I'm looking for is the green. The next thing is the light tours or the low angle ski tour descents. So in here we see when I clicked on the Discover tab, it showed the low angle descents nearby. I can say see all, and that just goes basically at a radius away from me. And they all have this tag, low angle ski tour descent. So if I click on one, it'll take me over there. This is the one on Boca Hill. And you'll see this little tag up here that says low angle ski tour descent. You'll see it comes from Beacon Guidebooks and the little discussion about what a low angle route means. It's a route to minimize avalanche exposure with a low angle approach, descent, and exit. In other words, I only tagged these low angle routes that are also paired with low angle approaches or and exits, because I don't want to just say like, I don't want to point you towards a low angle route that has a challenging or complex approach to it. This should be something that you can aim for and feel, if you feel good on that slope, you should feel good getting there too. So for example, you'll see the Boca Hill approach would be the way to get to this Doug's Delight run. This is a great illustration of seeing this descent on the green and not on that other colored stuff. Richard, was Boca, was that something we added like near the end? Like that was kind of a surprise at the end, or did you always plan on putting this in the book?
Um, that I don't think it was like the first 10 routes that we listed, but it was in there, and it was added specifically because, you asked like why light tours. The Boca, the beauty of that route is like it's right next to the highway. Like you drive by it, thousands of people see it every day. I don't think many people think, wow, I could go ski that. And if by highlighting that route just turns people on to the idea of like I'm driving down the highway, whether it's 20 or 80 or 70, and they see, hey, there's steep terrain over there. I wonder if I can go ski it. I would suggest the answer is yes. And by steep, I mean skiable.
Yeah, steep
That's
enough.
that
Right.
was the idea behind putting Boca in the book.
Cool. Yeah, it's like a hidden in plain sight kind of a thing.
Totally.
Um, and once again, like before, well, it does, you do kind of like tip over into something a little bit more orange there and yellow. I'd be interested to see what the eights layer shows us there. Um, here's the stuff that goes into the avalanche terrain exposure scale. So slope angle definitely comes into it. The steeper a slope, the more likely it is to avalanche. We have the runout layer, which is a pretty complicated computer model that basically simulates the runout of an avalanche and how likely it is to happen and how far it'll go. So when I turn it on here, once again, as I said at the beginning of this presentation, what these eights layers are doing is they're trying to illustrate what the mountains are capable of doing. And here is a nice example of the contrast between these two things. I'm going to toggle off the runout. I'm going to toggle back on slope angle. So we see in slope angles, like we've got some like green down here, which we just said, oh, green should be safe, right? Well, that's not the whole picture, right? Because we have not only the avalanche releasing, but the avalanche running somewhere. And so to simulate these two things, we created a layer called the potential release area, which is essentially using that slope angle But we mixed in some forest density data because forest density can affect avalanches, ability to release, and ability to run far. And then this runout layer illustrates in a very 1990s Atari way, is how I see it, runout. We see it actually, starts up there and comes all the way down to here. We'll show a couple other examples of that. Those are the fun layers to play with. The much more simple way to go about it, I should say the much more understandable way to go about it, is just toggling on the eights layer. Puts it into 3 different colors, green, blue, and black. This is a really good time to say green, blue, and black in eights is not the same as green, blue, and black at the ski area. This is not green circle, blue square, black diamond. Those are difficulties. Green, blue, and black, once again, is just saying you're in either simple terrain, challenging, or complex. And we can go into the definitions of those later if we want. But we see that Richard masterfully drew this Doug's Delight descent right around the challenging, staying in the simple, and finishing out there. Richard drew these lines before we had the eights layers, so it's been kind of fun to see that he really nailed it with a lot of these routes. Where's another one we should go to? Let's go to Johnson Canyon.
Okay, let's go to Johnson Canyon.
Okay, so this one's really cool. And this is a place I've never skied before, but I feel I can feel comfortable talking about. But please, Richard, interrupt me as soon as it's time. Go through the same sequencing. Oh, by the way, we should say that we can get the avalanche forecast layer on here as well. Like I said, we start with the forecast, right? So looks like today you've got moderate danger rating in that forecast zone. We can read all about it. And if you want to get more into the details of the avalanche forecast, the daily bulletin, and the travel advice and whatnot, you can always go to their external link and go to the avalanche centers. Then once we've looked at the avalanche forecast and we're looking at these light tours, once again, it's always good to start with slope angle. It tells us a lot. It really helps illustrate the steepness of the slopes. And what I see here is a lot of green. I think like this, I could go just about anywhere in here. Maybe avoid this if I'm trying to stay away from the same stuff. Maybe I can go all the way up this canyon because that's like well in the green, right? Well, it's what's really cool about these layers is you can actually look and see if these mountains are capable of producing avalanches into the valley. And you see here with the runout layer toggled on that, wow, this like snowshoe trail I was thinking about taking actually goes through a simulated runout zone. This is a really good little trigger in us. I don't know if trigger is the right word in avalanche language, but this really is a good time for us to say if we were planning a trip and I was planning on just going along this route, maybe I shouldn't walk underneath a runout zone. But then I say like, well, what's the nuance to this? Like is this saying that an avalanche, if it released there, will definitely cross that path? No, as we know that the different size avalanches will run different distances. It also depends on the bed surface, how fast an avalanche can move down the mountain. But if I really want to increase my margins, why not just go around that, right? So I see here that in the runout layer, we've got the lower probability, less frequent avalanches could go across here. So that tells me in high danger, probably want to stay away from that runout. So what I'd do is I would keep that layer on and I'd click on the route builder tool. I'd click on point draw because snap to snaps to summer trails like this one that we see here. And when we're building ski routes, we're usually not wanting to snap. But I might, when I'm proposing a tour with you and me, Richard, I might just build my own tour avoiding that path. All right, and then tell me if this is a good idea or not. If I want to go up and ski spring chicken, but I'm not sure it's the best thing to do today. I do see that I could stay away from these run out paths and avalanche terrain by going up this kind of broader ridge.
Totally. I'm with you.
and drawing this route to the top. Now that was like a low angle approach, right? I'm gonna say that's my low angle option. Um, I'll add it to a folder. Oh, look, I already created one called Johnson Tour Plan. I have to create a new one. I deleted that one earlier. And I'll save that and then I'll mail that to you and say, hey, what do you think of this different approach here? And now I know that I could
Mhm.
probably go back down that route if I don't want to get into that terrain. So that's one way I'd use this run out layer is just to check my biases and make sure that I'm just not going through any kind of run out paths unnecessarily.
Can I give you a couple of thoughts, Andy?
I was hoping you'd start chiming in here.
Okay, I was
I
like, I
had
don't want to steal your thunder.
no.
There's if we're trying to figure out like how anyone can use this, I think there's a couple of really cool things that y'all are doing at onX. I think separating the different levels, having a run out layer and having the release layer is is really valuable. I like the idea that it's not the layer isn't called this is avalanche terrain.
Yeah.
I like that it is like this is where avalanches release and there's a separate layer for this is where they run out. And I think that's really useful for people if they're trying to find terrain that they would want, to build their own light tours catalog. That line up the middle, the line labeled owls, that I just went up there with a group on Sunday and it was high avalanche danger. It was nuking out. It was awesome. And as people looked on the map, for folks who are not great map readers, to be able to pull this into 3D, they saw the steeper terrain on the sort of the to the northeast of the top of that Owl's Run in the middle.
Hmm.
And without the 3D layer, they were like, wait a minute, and good on them. They were like, hey, that's steep terrain right there. We said we were going to avoid avalanche terrain. That looks like avalanche terrain. And by being able to pop that into 3D, people could see like, oh, I get it. That's on the other side of the ridge. So it really made it make more sense to folks who maybe aren't great like two-dimensional map readers
Oh,
for
gotcha.
that. So,
Uh-huh.
so, so I really like that. Um, and for me personally, like I always want to like when I'm guiding, I want to make sure I get on the best snow possible each day. Yeah, like right there, they saw that and they're like, oh, there's steep terrain over there. We're supposed to avoid that. And isn't that overhead? Aren't we going to be in the run out of that? And and by popping it into 3D, they were like, oh yeah, I see. It's the other side. We're cool.
Right.
Um, and as I was saying, the ski guide in me, I always want to be on the best snow, which might be on a different aspect. The cool thing about the ascent route that you just planned for us is that it puts us on top of the ridge. And if we look on the other side of the ridge, there's a descent over there we could do called the Sunrise Bowl.
All right.
So we have options, which I think is the hallmark of a good plan is having options.
Oh, yeah.
So, and to move this from just like our banter to helping people make plans, I think what we're showing is ways that these layers that you all have put on um, can really help us paint a good picture of what the terrain looks like and what the avalanche story is, and not just like is it 30 to 45 degrees, but is it where avalanches are going to release? Is it where avalanches are going to run? I think that's super useful.
Agreed. That reminded me that the other way I've referred to light tours guidebooks is I've called them like the diving board books, which
Totally.
is that sometimes you can get up to these somewhat, sometimes if you're really looking for a big adventure, that can be kind of underwhelming tours, but they're really the best choice for the day for whatever reason. We've already listed a lot of the reasons. One of the best ways to gain familiarity of your zone and in the mountains is to get out there in the safest way you can, right? So even if you can't go ski something gnarly today, where can you go that you can like just get out there, like taste the snow, feel the trees, and get familiar with that terrain so that when the conditions do uh, admit you into more committing terrain, you're more familiar with it.
Yeah,
And this one, I think, is a good example of that, this Tamarack Peak, um, which kind of I think it's like the definition of diving board to me. And this is once again, I haven't been
totally.
here before, but tell me about if well, tell me if that's true and how
Yeah, for
you would
sure. So, for those who don't know, this zone, Tamarack Peak, is one of the more popular trailheads in around Tahoe. It's one of the higher elevation trailheads, so it's a great, as you're building that catalog of trips and a recipe box of trips that we were talking about before, and you're thinking, wow, it's raining at the lake. I want to go higher, or maybe it's just early season. I want to go up higher where there's more snow. A lot of people go to Tamarack, super busy place. And there's sort of a signature line there called the hourglass. And, the hourglass may not be for everybody. And you don't know until you get there. And there's no better way of figuring out whether that terrain is appropriate for you or not than actually putting your ski tips to the edge and saying, yep, I do or don't want to go in it. Um, and so the route that we put in the light tours book it goes up to the same peak. It can go to the same summit. You can put your skis right on top of the hourglass descent, but then you turn around and you ski back down a totally different aspect that avoids avalanche terrain. So it is the diving board. It is the first step in the adventure of discovering new terrain. So yeah, I'm agreeing with you 100% on that one, Andy.
yeah, you don't have to ski the hourglass to become more familiar with the hourglass.
Totally.
And not all terrain can you find in a safe way to look at. Sometimes you have to actually sometimes you have to save, for low danger to even go and check out anything. But
And
a
you
lot of these
might
light
even
tours
like
are diving boards.
Yeah, and you might even like if you wanted to be clever about it, like Tamarack isn't like the hourglass is roughly northish facing. It's not always in great shape. And maybe it's a spring day and there's good coverage on that south run that we have in the book. You go up there and have a kind of cool cruiser day, but also get up there on that day when you know you're not going to ski hourglass. Like I know it's not going to be good.
Hmm.
It's my day for exploring, though. It's my day that I'm going to go and ski the south facing slope because I think the snow is going to be better there.
Yeah, totally. Oh, I was trying to think of another classic diving board area,
Well, I
but I
don't
think you
know
got, I think we
if
illustrated
you
it
want to
enough.
look
But
in. I don't know if you want to look in your zone, but I know like around Carson Pass, there's some great diving board terrain that gets you into a lot, enables you to put eyes on new terrain. So,
Harrison
and I
Pass.
I encourage people to do that. Like go out for a day where you're not gonna, your intention is not to ski the sick line. Your intention is to reduce your uncertainty around what the lines look like when you're actually out there.
Yeah, where specifically?
I was thinking of, depending upon who you ask, Meese or Mice, Meese Meadows, Carson Pass.
Yeah,
There you go.
yeah, great ones.
Yeah. So it gets you into a new zone. It gets you high. It's nice, low angle approaches. And what are you flipping through over there? You're showing all kinds of cool stuff, and I'm not sure I'm even keeping up with you there,
Was I
Andy.
moving too fast?
Yeah, maybe for
Um,
for for
so
me.
here's so wait, how do we pronounce it? Meese or mice?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Um, from the trailhead, this is the light tour that you drew, um, where we've got go west, three fingers. Look at how that one skirts the eight's challenging.
Yeah.
Oh, I want to stop real quick and talk about that. I did see a question in the chat that I think is probably worth addressing. How do we go about creating the eighth layer? Is this just Andy painting the map? And who is this Andy guy anyway? Uh, this actually is a layer that has been invented only recently, but the concept of eights has been around for 20 plus years. It was created in Canada by Parks Canada, a man named Grant Statham and his team of experts and avalanche scientists and terrain experts. They came up with this system, basically a rubric by which to objectively define terrain. And like I said, its capability to produce avalanches. And what they did is without the algorithms of computers is they basically put any given slope through this rubric, which measured 11 different inputs, including exposure, slope angle, slope shape, terrain traps, the frequency and magnitude, the history of the avalanche paths there, starting zone size, run out zone characteristics, and then route options. And basically run all of those and say what, are the terrain traps bad or not so bad, just to put it into simple terms. And is the slope angle steep or low? And basically just run all that through the rubric, and then at the end, you've come up with an answer with amazing computers and this auto weights system. We've actually been able to run all those characteristics through the computer, and we've turned it into a layer on the map. So that's kind of where it came from. When we put it on the map, what we do first, before we just release it to the public, is we work with local avalanche centers, forecasters, guides, and people who've been there for a long time, basically, to ask them basically how it looks. And we ask them to go through a fairly systematic process uh, of getting it fact checked. And usually we come across like a few maybe runouts or starting zones that are inaccurately described, maybe overestimated, maybe underestimated. And then we make adjustments to the computer model. And once we're comfortable with it, we release it. So that's that's how this came about. And this is year number two. We're just starting this, and I'm really excited. I've been applying the eight scale to Beacon Guidebooks runs for 10 years, actually for 8 years now, and we're still learning. But to be putting on a map really lowers the amount of effort it took me. And Richard rated each one of these lines individually, and each zone individually. And I don't know, would you say it's quite a lot of work, Richard?
Yeah, I think it's I've done presentations on eights, and in those presentations, I'm like, it's easy to be a consumer of eights. It's hard to be the producer. I think it tells a great story when you're the consumer. And I think if you care to get it right, it's hard work to come up with the scale when you're adding lines and areas and zones onto the map.
Right.
That's what I think.
I see a pertinent question here in the chat that I'm going to address, which is kind of like the next step. How do you combine the models and the actual forecast? So we don't have a layer that does that. Basically, the the eights models is what we're looking at right here. Um, Richard, what mental process do you go through to combine this with the forecast? This is what we've been talking about today, is like start with the forecast, or at least read the forecast, and then start thinking about where you're going to go. Like, how do you try to marry those two things?
Yeah, well, in my process, and actually, I'm gonna hit pause really fast for 1 second, Andy, because we're
Yeah.
we're we're getting close to an hour, and I
Oh,
want to make
man.
sure that we're hitting the things that we're hitting. I'll stay on and talk to you for like another 2 hours. But I want to make sure that we're burning through the stuff that we pledged to do. I might also ask Matt if he doesn't mind. I want to make sure anybody that took time out of their day to come and be part of this. I do want to extend to y'all a free 2 week trial or week-long trial at Slab Lab, and I'm gonna ask Matt if he can throw that in the chat just in case people are like, I've been here for an hour and it's time for me to go make tuna noodle casserole or what have you. Um, but I'm happy to keep talking about what it is that how we apply this stuff. And and for me, like I use eights to kind of help me get agreement with my teammates. Like what kind of day are we looking for today? Are we looking for is today the kind of day where we should keep it simple? Is today the kind of day where we can get into terrain where like if anything were to happen, we are fully committed, which is not keeping it simple, right?
Right.
And if I start again with my teammates and try to figure out what is it, and I have a friend I ski with named Doug. We ski one or two really cool things a year. We get after it, but it's, and we're skiing in complex terrain, but we need to make sure that the conditions are right for those days first. And, so it's always for me starting with who's on my team. What are the conditions? What's the terrain like? And typically it's like, especially for like light tours, I'm like, yeah, I want to keep it simple today. Let me make sure I'm in an eight zone where it is simple terrain.
Yeah. What do you think about this? My
I'm
mom used
ready.
to always tell me that you need to add more greens. Whatever my
Ah,
problem was, got to have more greens. So I got a headache, get some more greens. You got backache, get some more greens. You're not sleeping well, get some more greens. Grumpy, add more greens. She was right, of course.
yep.
And I've been thinking about that as a way to talk about this world of avalanche decision making and risk assessment is can we add more green to our day? So you know that on the avalanche danger scale, low is green. So if the avalanche danger is low, then I can probably say like I got my greens. I wouldn't mind exploring into some blues or blacks today for and getting into some more avalanche terrain. I'm not saying like that's definitely what you should do, but oftentimes that's when I'll actually say like I've got my greens for the day. I'm gonna
Right.
throw some meat and potatoes in there.
Yeah. Getting the greens
However,
from the avalanche conditions.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it gave me the greens, and that's like the best one that we can ask for. But being in Colorado, we often have a persistent slab uh, problem, and we don't get green that much. So how else can I add greens to my day? Um, that's where that low angle slope shading came in. Um, maybe I should stay in these green zones and stay away from that non-green stuff. So add some more greens to my day that way. If I want to increase my margins even more, then I turn on that eights layer and say, not only do I want to stay in the green, I want to make sure I'm staying out of run out zones and away from overhead hazard. So this is like a great example of that, right? Like actually trying to avoid that overhead hazard that's up here that could run as far as here. So I don't know. What do you think about that? More grains, or is that just like annoy a bunch of people who are still angry that their moms made them eat spinach when they were kids?
I like it 'cause I love my mom.
Oh,
So I like it. I don't know what everybody else on the call thinks. Um, but I do think I think we're hitting some good stuff, right? I think we're talking about getting the character of the terrain with the eights. I think we're showing really briefly you showed how to add a route, which was cool. We can see how the routes are interacting with slope angle. Um, we can see especially with the 3D layers, we can see how what the overhead hazard is looking like. That
hmm.
clarifies a lot.
Yeah.
So I think I'm just trying to be mindful of the folks that are not blessed with having a beacon guidebook in their backyard, how they may be able to plan their own routes. And I think we may not have laid it out like in this linear fashion, but I think we're showing the tools to do that pretty well. Do you think we are, or can we improve on that, Andy, in
Oh,
the
I think we
time
can
left?
improve on it, Richard. And but it could take another hour. So
Yeah.
I feel like the next master class is really more route planning and really trying to figure out how to build your routes and build your plans and increase your margins of error.
Mm.
When when we talk about margins, that often sounds like a theoretical thing. Like
Oh,
a
oh,
margin is something that you give yourself by being really smart and um, knowing how maps work. Uh, they're literally physical margins. Oh, go ahead.
can I? Can we go back to? I know you just pulled up something in your backyard. Can we go back to Carson Pass for a second?
You betcha.
Because it's exactly what I was thinking of when you were showing that route and how the line we put on the map goes right next to the blue zone. I was even going to say, like, if you get, and I would encourage anybody who is using any squiggly line on a map to think this way. Um, where are we getting there? I think we're getting there. There we are.
Yeah, where exactly do you want me to go?
Uh, right, right there.
Oh,
And if we turn on the eights layer, that three fingers route goes right up next to the. Yeah, so if we're looking at these routes, and you talked about margin, and I love talking about margin, and I think a lot of people don't get like what does that actually mean to build margin into your plan? The the route that is, that kind of goes right to left from that ridge top, that has a lot of margin. You're not close to the blue zone, right? And
right,
oh
this one.
God. Yeah,
This
that
one.
one right there. It's like, great. I'm not, it doesn't look like anything is going to run out on me or I'm, I'm not in just like the bumped up terrain. But then when we go to the three fingers route, it's like, whoa, I'm right up next to it. Less margin. And I think that's a great example of seeing different margins in practice. But even then, if somebody said to me, you know what, Richard, I went out and I followed that line, it seemed really close to that steeper slope over there. I'd be like, yeah, did you go a little farther skiers right? Because that would have given you more margin.
Yeah, physical
Margin
margins
is like put
actually
more,
go further away from the
go
dangerous things.
further,
Yeah.
literally put more physical distance between you and the hazard.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I
Um,
think, and I hope people get that concept
I
because I
hope
think
so
that's a
too.
lifesaver and a fun saver.
Um, I'm gonna wrap us up there so that we can get to Q&A and to Matt spinning the wheel for us and
Love
doing
it.
the giveaway. So if there's something that you feel like we didn't cover, now is a good time to drop it into the Q&A. Um, Richard had pointed out that Slab Lab QR code. Matt has already put the link in the chat, and you're welcome to scan it here if you want. Pretty awesome idea that Richard's come out with, which is the ability to build that quiver of partners that we talked about.
And
One of the hardest things for all of us to do.
it's brand new and we thrive on feedback. So come in, take a look, use a free trial, tell us what you think. If you think I'd never pay for that, let us know and let us know how you'd find value in it. But we're really trying to help people find more and better backcountry partners.
Yeah. Matt, do you want to take over screen sharing?
I can do that. No questions before the end of this?
You don't have
All
anything in
right.
the Q&A?
No, it doesn't look like it. Yeah,
Too
thanks for all
easy.
the questions, everyone. I'm gonna spin the wheel. All right, can you see my screen, Andy?
Oh
Yep.
yeah.
All right, spin. All right,
Audrey
Audrey,
Vincent.
you are our first winner. I will be emailing the winners after the class here. So we have 5 more spins. Get excited.
And we'll let you choose between light tours of Colorado and light tours of Tahoe.
All right, Shahar.
Love it.
4 more spins of the wheel.
I love your spinny wheel.
It's fancy, right? You
Yeah.
need a real one. Tyler, congrats.
I do see while you're oh, unless you already answered these, Matt, I see 3 open questions in Q&A
We can kill 2 birds with 1 stone, right?
while you're doing it.
Yeah.
I see many of the trails have arrows on them. Are those intended directions of travel, i.e. or e.g. uphill versus downhill? Yes, those are the way that we drew them in the map, which so the ones pointing uphill, that's meant to be an up track. Usually when you click on them, you'll also see it labeled and described as an approach. And then oftentimes you'll see the same exact line represents the down as well, and you'll see a multi-directional arrow. Greg.
All right. Our final winner is Greg. To all the winners, I'll shoot you an email after the webinar and get everything set up. And I'm going back to dark.
Nice. Thanks, Matt. The next question I see is there any chance to go find a Utah route outside of the Cottonwoods? I imagine that's like, can we go there in the demo right now? Um, I'm happy to stick around after the presentation's over and we can go into Utah into the little Cottonwood. Sounds fun to me. If you want to stick around, Richard.
Yeah, let's do that like extra innings.
And then a guy named Tom Cow said I had questions about the escape routes in Hourglass. I don't know if there's questions that I'm missed, or if Richard, you already know what his questions are.
I don't.
I do. Sorry. Yeah, Tom was asking specifically about what made it eight's rating 2 challenging versus 3 in the Hourglass, as well as some of the escape routes that exist on it.
Thank you. I'm gonna share again to answer that question. Is that all right with you, Matt?
Yeah.
Hourglass. Okay. So I'd say this question is diving into the more advanced side of eights ratings. And Richard, I'd love for you to chime in here. This is once again, I live in Colorado. I have not skied the Hourglass. So 2 different ways to do eights. One is the linear method, which is to apply eights literally from the ground, at the ground level. So that's what we use to rate routes and actual lines on the map is the linear method. And using the linear method, that's where we apply all 11 inputs to the eights rubric. And then when we are done with all those inputs, we decide on the rating. The second way is to do it spatially. And spatially, like the way I remember how spatially works, is it's literally from space. And that's where we're using these overall layers that go over the whole map. So we're not using all 11 inputs in the auto weights. We're using the ones that we can do with a computer. So like, for example, we can't tell you with a computer, like where you have multiple route options, multiple options to reduce your exposure. So the vision and what we will be doing more and more, we already have it in quite a few books throughout onX. The vision is to have this auto eights layer, and then each individual route will have an eights rating as well. So right now, if I click on the hourglass, I see that we have not gotten around to rating the actual line, but we'll say this is challenging terrain. I think Tom's question was specifically, why is it challenging and why isn't it, say, complex? Why isn't it, say, simple? This is probably due to a handful of outputs. Number one, it's the like I said before, the capability of slope to produce an avalanche. How steep is it? How big can that avalanche be? And are there options sorry, the how long, how far can the avalanche actually run? Now, when we look at the hourglass line, I would say once you are midway down the hourglass, yeah, you don't have options to reduce or eliminate your exposure. You're committed, you're in that line. And I would say that's true for a lot of lines. And that's why we like to rate lines differently than the terrain that they're in. However, I would say this matches a pretty good challenging slope, intermittent exposure, sorry, moderate angle that's less than or equal to 35 degrees, mostly planar with isolated convex or unsupported slopes. Single slopes above gullies or risk of impact into trees or rocks. Yeah, I'd say that's true. Isolated starting zones with a less than or equal to size 3 potential. Also true. So I'm just reading off the rubric right now of what goes into rating something as a challenging. So once again, I haven't been here, haven't skied it. Richard, I don't know, what are your thoughts on it?
Well, my thoughts are I was really curious to hear how you would explain it from that sort of spatial perspective. From a boots on the ground perspective, because I was asked this question very recently about this specific ground, and and I'll admit I was doing other work, so I did not like put the same rigor that I put into like picking the lines for the book. Um, but I did what I do, which is I pulled out the technical model, the linear, all the criteria, and I just started circling them. And for where I thought the terrain was, whether it was simple, challenging, complex, and almost all the circles were in challenging. And I was kind of scratching my head at the very bottom of the rubric. And I was, and I think an important thing, at least for me, like I'm not building eights layers in my day-to-day life. Um, but as I understand it, it's still a discussion, and the instructions I've been given include come up with your best answer, share that with other, other professionals, see what they say, and try to come up to some consensus agreement.
Yeah.
And 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 like my question was like how often do we get like I know it slides, but how often do we get something that's size 2 or bigger? Do we get size
Mhm.
3? How often do we get a size 3 in the hourglass? And like I said, most of my circles were right down the middle of challenging and a couple of head scratchers. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah,
Here's,
I don't know
yeah,
what the right answer is there then.
Yeah, I think this might be the gist of the question. I can see it. Tom has said, I'm especially curious if escape options are requirements for a route
Mm,
to be challenging rather than complex. And that's the heart of the question. So, and this can be often confused. Um, and it's one of those things that I think the discussion that I want to have when we're deciding whether to rate something challenging versus complex um, is is since the model gave us like an answer, are we comfortable with that answer? The model should be giving us an answer. And so what we're looking for, and I'm showing everyone the rubric right here. This is open source. This is from Avalanche or from Parks Canada. What we do is we look at it and a slope and we say, okay, is that slope best defined as minimal exposure, crossing low frequency runout zones, intermittent exposure, managing a single path or paths with separation, and so on and so forth. Things getting more and more severe. Let's say it's this one. We check that one, and we say slope angle, forest, and density. It's a moderate angle, less than 30 degrees, open or graded. Um, we color that one too. But here we say slope shape actually is better defined as convoluted open slopes with intricate terrain. So we highlight that and we go on and on. Now let's say at the end of the day, this to answer Tom's question, let's say that we highlighted there's limited options to reduce exposure, avoidance not possible. Let's say we filled that out. but let's say everything else was what fit into challenging. Our answer at the end is going to have to be challenging. I shouldn't say it has to be, but the answer, according to eights, is that we define this slope as challenging because it had more challenging characteristics than complex characteristics. Hopefully that answers your question. Now, sometimes, or not sometimes, what Avalanche Canada did is they put these defaults in. In other words, if there is frequent exposure to starting zones, tracks, or multiple overlapping paths, if you highlighted that, then you've automatically defaulted your rating up to complex.
And for people to follow along, that's, you know, that it automatically goes to complex because it's a bold.
Because it's bolded. Thank you. Yep.
Because it's bolded.
Yep.
Any of the bolded
Yep.
criteria or characteristics.
But this is the workflow for how we go about rating eights in the linear method. The auto eights is a whole nother beast. But this is how we go through it. And this is the method that I'm using to check and cross-reference the auto eight stuff. Basically, when I see ski routes and lines or popular ski runs going through something that auto eights has called challenging or has kind of patches of challenging and complex in it, I'm using this rubric to basically fact check it and see it, how well we agree, how well the humans agree with the computers.
Yeah. And hey, Andy, I'll just take this moment and give you guys a plug. You know, I don't work for onX. I think that the level of commitment you make to making sure that it, like, to doing your best to make sure that you're putting out good factual information is commendable. I think a lot of people would probably want eights to be everywhere. And I think to see right now that it, like in California, it's just in the Tahoe area. It's not everywhere. And the reason for that, as I understand it, is the hard work that you put in individually going through and ground proofing or ground truthing what auto eights is telling you. So as I understand it, we're not at a place where we can just like flip the switch and let the computers do all the work and tell us. Um,
It would be
and
nice.
it would be nice.
Well, I don't know
And
if that would be nice, but
well, but it's commendable that y'all are doing the hard work that you're doing to try to make sure that what you're actually putting out is accurate. So good on you.
thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that is basically what's holding us up is we run every region through what can take a long time for the computers to process. So that's a bit of the time. But really the crux is our fact checking process and making sure that what we're putting out is reliable and responsible. And that just takes time. That's on me and a few other wise folks at onX. And then we're asking for basically some of the avalanche forecasters to volunteer their time to help us out. And
Hey,
anyone else who's willing to contribute who really knows that terrain and the history of the terrain.
Andy, I think we've just taken a nice tangent down, Eights Alley here, and got into some heady stuff that is definitely, I think, outside the scope of, planning late tours. I bet my guess is the people who are still on are interested in it. But Chris asked a, a super relevant question, I think,
Go for
in
it.
the Q&A,
If you've used
which
onX to plan a tour, what method or technology do you use to follow that route the day of the tour? Compass with headings and elevation, follow on your phone, Garmin watch, etc. This might be specific to Richard. Oh, yeah. What and yeah, Richard.
yeah,
What do you use? What technology do you use?
well,
There's
I think.
no wrong answer.
Yeah, no. So I use, actually I use several mapping apps when I'm in the field, usually concurrently. And, because I think they each do different things really well and they each have their strong points. Like I use onX in the field, I use Gaia in the field, I use Caltopo in the field. And Chris, I think the helpful answer to what you're saying is, can I take these routes into the field with me? And what we've been showing is basically the desktop and a little bit of hint of actual route planning. But by all means, you can take onX into the backcountry with you and follow these routes. And we've just been focusing on the planning side rather than the mobile app side. What do you think, Andy?
Yeah, totally. Sorry, trying to keep up with the chat and with the we were given a specific request to look at Cottonwood and here we are. This is Little Cottonwood Canyon. Uh and the only spot that I could go to that I can where I can say that I've skied a little bit, so I'm at least superficially familiar with it. Really popular trailhead in the Cottonwoods. We do have a good bit of the Wasatch covered with eights at this point, so that's something to be proud of and excited about. I believe like a lot of people park in this area.
Hey, Andy, I'm gonna make your life harder for you.
Please.
Jeff is saying that he's actually asking for outside of Cottonwood.
Oh, it's outside the Cottonwoods. Yeah, extra challenge.
Yeah, the Shaky Pass. And he said, oh, it just disappeared, but I think Snow Basin maybe is what he was steering
No
towards.
basin. Is that north?
You're, I can't help you on this one. But if we look at terrain, I can start thinking about where I want to go skiing.
Oh yeah. Okay, great example of a place where maybe we don't have any light tours authors making stuff. So, but we have eights, which means we also have slope angle and the starting zones and the runouts. So,
Oh, sweet.
if you're going to a trailhead, you have this to work with. One really cool thing, like that you'll see is, these like green bands on the ridges, and that is a good way to define simple terrain. You actually, when you're on top of a ridge, you have a very low likelihood of getting into an avalanche unless you're stepping on top of a cornice. Um, Trying to think of like one, like I guess without knowing any backcountry skiing at all around here, we're in totally unfamiliar territory. Using these layers, or just let's just say using the eights layer and trying to draw a route from a trailhead, might do so like this. Well, let me start. I'll actually start even before that. Is there even snow here? That's like my first
Mm.
question. If I'm going to go to Snow Basin to visit Brandon, I've never been. Um, there's a ski area, so that tells me it probably carries snow sometimes. So I might check the conditions of the ski area. I'll probably look for a snowtail station nearby, and then I'll toggle on my satellite layer to see if in snow mode it holds snow sometimes. And that's where we have the difference between where we put the snow layer and where we didn't put the snow layer. But either way, I can see that yes, it can carry snow sometimes. And if I know I just want to get out on my skis and do a light tour because I'm alone while visiting my friend, then this is like actually a great place for me to look. I say like I might be able to go tour up the slope. I'll definitely have to do some more research as if this is open or allowed or anything like that. But just from a terrain perspective, um, that's where I'd start, and I'd want to keep it in the green, and I'd start building a route up that ridge and increasing my margins by staying away from the blue and getting up to that ridge. And maybe I've made myself a nice little tour, and it could be just a total breakable crust sufferfest on the way down, or maybe I found a really good light tour.
Yeah. You could, It looks like to me, if it was like going to be Sufferfest all the way down, um, I'd probably kick in a little a side trip from where you went up to because you're right by Sardine Peak, right? Farther
Uh-huh.
up the
Uh-huh.
ridge.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
You go
You
up the
go you
ridge,
go you go to the top. Yeah.
tag a summit. Summits don't matter. Tag the summit. Um, get a better view.
Green doesn't show trees. How do we know if there are trees? That's how we know if there's trees. That's at least one layer I would use is using the satellite layer. If you're in topo, that forest density will show, you know, the green versus non-green, but satellite is way more descriptive. All right. Well, I think we should wrap it up. The questions keep coming
Okay.
though. Man, look at this.
I tell you
Um,
what, like that tour, that Sardine Peak tour, we could turn that into a loop.
I'm just waiting
Design.
for someone from that area to just like write us a message and be like, "Do you guys? No one can ski here. What are you talking about?"
Could be. I don't
Um,
know, but
you're
this
liking
is
it.
this is adventure. This is discovery, right? This is get the juices flowing.
Oh, another way to find out if there is snow. Sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't. Recent imagery is satellite photos from let's see, from November 25th to December 9th. So it doesn't show the most recent, but it does tell us at least, hey, there might be a base here. And as you can see, it's way lower quality because it's this is just like short-term satellite photos. But that does give me a sense that I don't know, Richard, maybe we're onto something, man.
Maybe. Maybe we can go skiing. Who knows?
There's a good using the run out layer is kind of helpful for like that route that I drew did go into that run out a little bit. So first of all, it's so unfamiliar to me. I'm not walking there during high danger. Um, and that purple shade tells me that in high danger, avalanches are capable of getting to there potentially. So I'd probably just uh, go to the ski area that day. Well, cool.
Yeah.
We
I
should
mean,
wrap it
that's
up.
another good opportunity there to talk about margin right there. There's plenty of there is plenty of margin to the lookers right of the of that run out.
True. Hmm.
All depends on how you feel about how much risk do we want to accept.
Exactly. Exactly.
I love it.
Well, huge thank you to you, Richard, for
Oh,
joining
my
me,
pleasure.
um, showing off your area and your region. Um, thanks to everyone who is still with us.
Yeah.
Uh, this is tons of fun. I before we started this, I said, Richard, we could talk for hours and hours. Like, how are we going to know when to wrap it up? And um, I'm tempted to keep talking, but also I want to I want to let our support crew go. I want to let you go back to your life, and I hope we do another one of these soon. And of course, thanks to our back end staff, Matt and Liz, and always reach out to us with questions, guys. We've got support team at onX. I'm pretty easy to find too, and we always appreciate feedback and your awesome questions. So
Yeah.
thank you.
And thanks to everybody who showed up and stuck with us. Y'all are all awesome.
Agreed. Okay, bye bye.
All righty.